March soybeans ended the day unchanged. That came after being higher most of the night session into the day session on pre-report short covering. We have a massive USDA or set of USDA reports happening on Friday. So not terribly surprising to see a little bit of short covering after a sort of extended trend to the downside that we've been seeing. And this January report has kind of had a recent history of garnering a positive reaction from the soybean market. So more on that in just a moment. Before we get to that, we had our weekly export sales report, and that came in well below expectations. Our weekly export sales of soybeans, only 280,000 metric tons. That's well below what we're normally used to seeing at this time of year. This is our export window where we are usually the leaders in the world as opposed to South America. Obviously, we work on opposite schedules as we have different, well, exactly opposite seasons. Either way, that 280,000 metric tons was well below the range of guesses. The low end of those guesses were 325,000 metric tons, the high end at 950. And that 950 represents something a lot closer to what we would normally expect this time of year. So it was disappointing to say the least. Now, as mentioned earlier, on Friday, we have a massive amount of data coming from the USDA in the form of their monthly USDA WASDE, World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates, but this also encompasses our quarterly grain stocks report. It's also our final production number from last year's crop. It's also a very important update on the South American production, specifically Brazil. And we have our winter wheat seedings thrown in all on top of that. So lots and lots of moving parts. What I will say is that for the most part, analyst expectations seem pretty close together and also seem pretty close to a lot of the numbers that we saw at the end of last year, meaning they're not looking for final production numbers to change dramatically. I'm not either. I'm one of the analysts that contribute, by the way. They're not looking for big changes in our domestic ending stocks, not looking for big changes on quarterly grain stocks numbers, at least not any big surprises. There are expectations for some changes for South America. For example, the Brazilian production, soybean production last month was reported at 161,000 metric tons. The average trade guess has that coming down to 156.26 million metric tons. That's a whole lot of soybeans either way, but it is a fairly sizable reduction. The range of guesses there is 151 to 161, so there's a large range, a big idea of where this number could end up. But for our domestic ending stocks numbers, that's really the bottom line of the balance sheet, the bottom line of the report that we look at. For soybeans, we're looking for 243 million bushels. That's not far off of the December WASDE we saw at 245 million bushel. The range of guesses there, by the way, is rather large at 215 million to 314, but most of the guesses are all centered around that 240, 245 area, as you can tell by the average. So it's going to be a lot to look at on Friday. And this report does tend to set the tone here for the next couple months. So it is something that we should all be paying pretty close attention to. We'll see how that goes. So stay tuned, everybody. Have a wonderful day and be safe.